I saw A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms for the first time a few weeks ago, and let me tell you, bro, I have never been more pleasantly surprised by a modern TV show in the last few years, more so than with A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. The two things that I look for most when judging or ranking a show are great writing and story and great direction slash cinematography, and this show knocks both out of the park in an incredible fashion. On the writing side of things, you've got probably the most likable modern character in Ser Duncan the Tall. And on the cinematography side of things, the show is just so damn gorgeous. And it really speaks for itself with the beauty of its shots and its cinematography. If you haven't watched A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms yet, please do so. There will be spoilers in this video. I think the biggest reason why I was not expecting this show to be so good is mostly because modern television and cinema has had a lack of honorable, well-written characters for the last few years now. Maybe I'm ignorant to a ton of characters that have been made in the last few years, but I highly doubt it. However, this series has given me a revitalized hope for the future of TV shows. I was completely blown away by the writing in this show because I was expecting some girl boss halfway through to completely nerf the main protagonist for the show, Ser Duncan the Tall. But that does not happen at all, and we see a character with such high honor that it genuinely reminds me of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings with how admirable his moral compass is. For some background, Ser Duncan the Tall in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a hedge knight, which, if you're not familiar with the lore of Game of Thrones, is essentially a bottom-of-the-barrel level of knight that someone can be. Hedge knights are not to be confused with lords of noble birth. No, they have no castle and no steady pay. Hedge knights might sleep under hedges, hence the name, and in this show they fight in tourneys for pocket change, and take whatever shady job comes their way just to eat. Most hedge knights end up broken, bitter, or dead, as this series shows us, but not Ser Duncan the Tall. Duncan, as he's commonly known throughout the show, had very humble beginnings, and it all starts down in Flea Bottom, which is the worst slum in King's Landing. With no parents to raise him, we see a younger version of Duncan barely get by via many flashbacks throughout the show. It is through these flashbacks that we truly understand Duncan better. Duncan was not entirely alone during his humble beginnings in Flea Bottom. No, he was with a girl known as Rafe, who he loved very dearly, and the two of them scavenged battlefields and made ends meet however they could. Together, Rafe and Duncan shared a dream of escaping Flea Bottom on a ferry towards a brighter future. This dream, tragically, did not unfold. I don't have the time to go over the entire plot of this section of the show, but all you need to know is that the only person in the world that was left that Duncan trusted and loved, Rafe, died in a pickpocketing scuffle. It was through Rafe's death that we see Duncan gravitate towards Sir Arlen of Pennytree, his future mentor and an older hedge knight that happened to save Duncan's life in the tussle that killed Rafe. Sir Arlen of Pennytree takes Duncan in and teaches Duncan everything a good knight must know: how to swing a sword, how to ride, but most importantly, what it actually means to be a knight. Not the fancy titles or the shiny sigils. Sir Arlen teaches Duncan a knight's vows: protect the weak, be brave, be just, and be honorable. If we fast forward a few years, Arlen dies of a fever on the road. There's no big dramatic death scene here, it's just a quiet, sad ending for Duncan's mentor. He ends up burying him and puts on his mentor's armor, straps on his sword, and decides he's going to carry on the name. Duncan knights himself right there in the mud and thus becomes Ser Duncan the Tall. Because Duncan was never actually officially knighted by Sir Arlen of Pennytree, the show calls into question what does it actually mean to be a knight and a highborn of noble status. When asked about the validity of his knighthood by other characters in the show, we can see how evasive Duncan is about the matter, especially with how timely Sir Arlen of Pennytree's death was just after Duncan's knighting occurred. This is so important because it suggests to us that Duncan is not actually even a hedge knight, but a mere commoner feigning knighthood. This is where the central theme of the show, at least for me, shines through, and that is, does Duncan not being knighted officially truly matter for him to be a knight? This show begs the question, is honor something to be given to us through a title? Is it through this title that we must vow to protect the innocent and stand up for what is morally right? Or is knighthood a virtue, which is the strenuous path of always choosing to do good, that one, such as a commoner like Ser Duncan the Tall, can strive for? This question of what makes a knight has been a central theme in my mind as I've reflected on the show, and why I think Ser Duncan the Tall is such an awesome, well written character. Speaking of character, another aspect that makes Duncan so well written is his bashful disposition, despite standing at 7 foot tall and being made of pure muscle. I think it's through this disposition that we can see, in the beginning of the show, how an adult Ser Duncan still identifies with this scared child barely getting by in the ghetto of Flea Bottom, always questioning his worth and wondering if he could ever be good enough to ever win a round in the Ashford tourney. And he's not necessarily the smartest character either, but this is something Duncan is also keenly aware of. It is through this self-awareness that Ser Duncan the Tall is so magnetic. His humility speaks volumes more about his character than winning 100 battles in a tournament ever could. At the beginning of the show, we see him ride to the Ashford tourney looking for glory, a little coin, and maybe a chance to prove he's a real knight. And that's when everything changes. He sees a young woman, a puppeteer named Tansel, getting terrorized by Prince Aerion Targaryen and cutting her finger off. Aerion is everything wrong with the Highborn. Cruel, entitled, sadistic, and much like Joffrey in the original Game of Thrones. Most people in Dunk's situation would look the other way. However, Duncan doesn't. He steps in, and he defends her honor even though it costs him everything. He gets dragged into a trial by combat, a trial of 7 because Aerion is a prince. I have to say that the honorability of Ser Duncan in this section of the show is juxtaposed so well by that of Prince Aerion. Prince Aerion knows he's at a physical disadvantage over Ser Duncan and would likely be bested in a 1v1 battle with him. However, rather than do this, Prince Aerion takes the coward's way out by employing the ancient and looked down upon tradition of a trial by 7, which this essentially elevates the beef from a 1v1 into a small 7v7 battle, where the playing field is now in Prince Aerion's favor, because he is now able to recruit highly skilled noble warriors to help him defeat Duncan from the King's Guard. Duncan, who he knows has less power, influence, and resources to even get 6 other knights to fight for him. This trial by 7 sequence of the show is literally so peak, because it is here that we see the true character of Duncan shine through. In one of the best and most intense combat sequences I've ever seen be put to screen, we the audience are able to see one of the most admirable last stand sequences when Duncan is sent to the brink of death and somehow manages to come back to whoop Prince Aerion's ass. This whole trial by 7 scene is just literally peak, mostly because it appeals to the male fantasy of having like that super sick death. But the level, on a real note, on the level of pain and agony that we see Duncan endure in this sequence, as he literally gets a pike lance gashed into his side, gets blinded in one eye, and gets cut in like 100 other ways, it is just yet another reason for us to admire his resolve and honor. At the end of this trial by 7, Dunk had pretty much every opportunity to slay Aerion, as he absolutely deserved to be. Yet when Aerion called for mercy, Dunk gave it to him, despite his berserk-induced rage. We see a man brought to the brink of death by another man, tested to his absolute limits, and yet he still grants mercy when it is requested. Why did he do this? Because it's what any true knight would do in this situation. What makes Duncan the Tall one of the most best-written characters on modern television, hell, I mean maybe even ever, it's that he's actually honorable without a single ironic twist. The show never pulls that lazy, subvert expectations crap we've seen everywhere else. There's no girl boss side character swooping in to make him look dumb. There's no sudden heel turn where his honor gets him killed for shock value. Instead, the writing lets his goodness win. It lets his flaws exist. Yeah, I mean, he's impulsive, he's not book smart, he gets in over his head. But those flaws never cancel out his virtues. He doubts himself constantly, but he still does the right thing every single time. Look at the way he carries himself. I mean, he's this giant, intimidating wall of a man, yet he's gentle, and he's protective. He looks at the world and sees people who need help, not opportunities to climb. In a franchise famous for backstabbing and moral gray area, Duncan is the one bright, steady light. He's the knight we all wish we could be. And the show trusts the audience enough to just let him be that. There's no lectures or modern politics shoehorned in, and it's just pure, earned heroism. I think that's why I look up to him so much. In a time when every hero on screen is either a sarcastic anti-hero or a flawless badass with zero growth, Duncan feels real. Even though he's flawed, he's humble and he's trying his absolute best, and that's enough. I genuinely catch myself thinking, what would Duncan do when I'm in a tough spot now? Would he take the easy way out? Or would he stand up for someone who can't fight for themselves? That's the kind of virtue I want to chase in my own life. And let's talk about the writing for a second. George R. Martin and the showrunners didn't just adapt the novellas, they honored them. They kept Duncan's voice exactly right. Straightforward, a little awkward, but completely sincere. The dialogue never sounds like it's trying to sound cool. It sounds like a real guy who means what he says. And the chemistry between Duncan and Egg is the heart of the whole thing. It's this beautiful found family story where the Big Dumb Knight and the Secret Prince teach each other what it means to be good men. By the end of the season, you're not just entertained, you're genuinely inspired. Modern television has spent years telling us that honor is naive, that chivalry is outdated, that the only smart move is to be cynical. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms looks us dead in the eye and says, "No, watch this." And then it delivers one of the most genuinely good protagonists we've seen in years without ever making him boring or pretentious. So, if you haven't watched it yet, stop what you're doing, go watch Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Let Duncan surprise you the same way he surprised me. And if you already have, drop your favorite Dunk moment in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. If this video restored even a little bit of your faith in heroic storytelling, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.